Welcome to Coach the Mother. I'm Dr. Natalie Forcell. I'm a virtual pelvic floor PT, postpartum fitness expert, and mama who's walked through grief, healing, and the long road back to herself. Around here, we are rewriting the outdated narratives around birth and the body. We're demystifying healing, reclaiming strength, and giving modern moms the wisdom they should have been given from the start. Let's coach the mother. I'm really pumped to talk about this topic today. We are going to talk about what the postpartum recovery timeline looks like, what it doesn't look like, and what you can do about it. This is just some fundamental basics of postpartum that I really wish every mom knew, because when we go into that 6-week checkup, we are given none of this information, not even before we get into the birth room. Nowhere along our pregnancy do we learn what to expect postpartum. We might have all of the support in the world from doulas and midwives or a really great OB that we do love and trust, but next to none of them truly understand what the pelvic floor is, how to heal, and generally what postpartum recovery looks like from a healing standpoint. First, let's just talk about what people think it is. I would love for you to ask this question to yourself. What did you think postpartum recovery meant before you got there? Most times the answers that I hear moms say is nothing. I didn't really think much about it at all. I was really in the midst of getting ready for the birth and prepping my hospital bag and taking these breastfeeding classes and these newborn baby classes and these birth classes, but I did not think anything about postpartum itself. Or maybe their framework of what postpartum recovery looks like is just almost every other mom they've seen, whether that's their aunt, their grandma, their cousins, their sisters, their friends. We can compare our postpartum recovery to somebody else's, and postpartum is a huge range. We are not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to birth. Yes, millions of women birth, but millions of women have drastically different experiences when it comes to postpartum. I'm sure you can think of that one friend or that person that you know who postpartum baby is born and they just seem to magically drop their 20, 30 pounds in a matter of weeks. Meanwhile, you might be the person who your body has just clung to this weight and you feel like you still look pregnant even though you're 12 months postpartum, 2 years postpartum, and you're wondering what's different about this for me. Or maybe your idea of postpartum recovery is just pain and suffering. You have noticed your body's changed. You've noticed that sex doesn't feel the same anymore. You've noticed that you leak a little bit when you cough or sneeze, and apparently so does everybody else. So that is your view of recovery. Whatever happens after birth is just the way that it is. That is reinforced by a really poor, medically outdated, and honestly useless 6-week checkup. If you've been through my other podcasts, you know that I've gone into depth about what I believe about that 6-week checkup. But to briefly reiterate, the 6-week checkup is physiologically meaningless. Essentially, you go into that appointment and we do want to make sure that there are no big complications that have been overlooked, but research shows that moms are not out of the woods postpartum when it comes to even bigger issues, internal bleeding, or some type of medical complications can arise well up to a year postpartum. So that 6-week checkup kind of does nothing. And bonus, you get no education on what postpartum recovery actually looks like. Meanwhile, in other fields of physical therapy, it is highly researched when it comes to any type of surgery, whether that's a back surgery, a spine surgery, a knee replacement, a hip replacement, ACL repair, Achilles repair. I've worked in orthopedic settings before I got really into pelvic floor, and there is so much research, guidance, and structure around what a recovery timeline looks like when you experience these types of surgeries or medical procedures. For example, the research around healing for an ACL repair has very specific day by day, week by week expectations of what a patient can or cannot do, certain limitations or restrictions they have, or things that they should be able to accomplish by their 12-week visit, their 16-week visit. If people are discharged from an ACL surgery after just 1 to 2 months, you can guarantee that they will have a re-injury. There is so much information when it comes to other places in our body about recovery timelines, especially in physical therapy, but there is almost none of that out there that we talk about when it comes to postpartum. What postpartum recovery timeline does not look like, again, is that 6 week checkup. Just because you saw your doctor and they say you're cleared, that absolutely does not mean your body is ready for anything because they didn't check. Is your pelvic floor ready to handle the load of sex and intimacy? Is your pelvic floor ready to handle the load of higher level exercise? Is your core healed? How does your muscular tone look around your core, your hips, your glutes? All of these really stabilizing aspects of your body that have been totally obliterated through your pregnancy and postpartum. Postpartum recovery, definitely, no matter how active you were before you had your baby, does not look like getting that 6 week clearance checkbox and then thinking you can jump right back into whatever fitness you were doing before you gave birth or before you even got pregnant. Whether that's activities you like to do, like running, hiking, CrossFit, Pilates, some heavier strength train lifting, tennis, I don't know, pickleball. That 6 week mark is not the time to jump into these high level movements. And I really want to talk about why. First, I'm going to pull in some science. You know that I love science. I always try to incorporate real science for you and link it in the show notes so that you can trust I'm not just pulling this out of thin air, that I work with my clients with a highly researched framework. And I think what it's important to talk about before we get into a recovery timeline specifically is what happens before we even become postpartum. There are many types of moms out there. Some of us are super highly active. We used to be athletes back in the day. We love to train hard. Maybe you were exercising multiple days a week in a gym, and you were doing that throughout your pregnancy. You felt really strong and empowered going into your birth. You were able to keep up a high level of activity. Or there's some moms who used to be active before they got pregnant, but then pregnancy itself just really took a toll on them. The nausea, the fatigue, all of these barriers that come up with your changing body that made it feel so impossible to move, or you could only tolerate bits and pieces here, a little walking, but nothing as high intensity as maybe you used to enjoy. Or there are moms who don't really have much of a relationship with exercise. They didn't do much of that before they were pregnant, definitely didn't care about doing that while they were pregnant. They were living the glorious couch potato life and just enjoying the ability to grow your baby and just sink into that space of rest. Love that for you. Wherever we are at, we all come into a pregnancy from such different places. What does happen to almost all of us is deconditioning of our skeletal muscles. This can happen to any one of those moms I described. This article that I found on PubMed talks about the effects of early deconditioning on human skeletal muscles. This article is kind of fun because it is talking specifically about astronauts and space flight. So stay with me here. But astronauts are one of the very few human beings who will experience zero gravity in their lifetime. Definitely won't be me. In that experience, we know that gravity is the thing that makes our muscles strong. We need some resistance and force to create muscle mass, whether that is doing bodyweight exercise or heavy lifting. But if you remove all gravity and there is no stress on the muscle tissue, what happens to it? It doesn't just stay there. It melts away. Our muscles need to be able to have some resistance and force to create muscle tone. Astronauts are very unique because even if you had a complete bed rest pregnancy, you were not able to get up out of bed hardly at all, you still don't experience zero gravity. However, this article really highlights just how quickly our skeletal muscle can decondition or melt away. Long of it short, in this study, All it took was 5 days for these astronauts in spaceflight with zero gravity to have severe deconditioning of their skeletal muscles. To reinforce just how quickly our muscle mass can change in pregnancy, I found another more relatable article that talks about the loss of muscle strength and atrophy during bed rest, which again is a little more familiar than spaceflight. And in this time frame, the findings essentially noted that in the acute period of bed rest between days 1 to 10, that skeletal muscle size and function already reduced within the first few days of bed rest and continued to decline with length of exposure, and even short amounts of time show a high clinical significance of patients who notice loss of muscle mass. We can know and feel in our own bodies. Just think about your own pregnancy and or postpartum. I am thinking about my own, that I was really active before I got pregnant, moderately active throughout my pregnancy. Towards the end of my pregnancy and that third trimester, I slowed down quite a bit. I just kept walking, but I wasn't doing very much strength training at all. And then as soon as baby was born and I had to carry the load of my baby in my arms, I realized so quickly how weak I felt. Even though I had spent years being so active, all it took was a matter of a few months for my body's muscle mass to change so significantly. And in that as well, I remember with my first baby especially, I was one of those moms that did drop weight really quickly. I gave birth, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I was down to my air quotes pre-baby weight. And I just remember looking at that scale, being a little confused, and also feeling like my body did not look like it did when I weighed this last time. I felt like my stomach was a pile of mush and so soft and floppy. I felt like I had still some fat and pudge to my look, which is totally fine, but I'm like, weight was just not an accurate measure for how I felt in my body, because when I was this weight before baby, I felt strong and I felt really active, and now I felt so just deconditioned and weak. And even if you're a mama who can spend all the way up to your 39th week of pregnancy lifting weights and jogging or whatever, you are a top 1%, way to go. But all it takes is a few weeks of that postpartum to lose muscle mass. And it's also really hard to maintain muscle mass in pregnancy in general. So I just want to lay that foundation so that I can validate how big of a toll this was on our body and how much changes just after one birth, let alone if you have multiple babies over the course of a 5 to 10 year span and you don't have time or you don't put intention into rebuilding some of this muscle mass and control in your body between babies. That's where we start to feel some of these small and subtle issues or dysfunctions that feel like no big deal at all turn into really debilitating symptoms by your second, third, or fourth baby, whether that's after your first baby, you had no leaking, or you leaked sometimes when you sneezed, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And now you're in your third postpartum and you're like, I cannot hold my pee to save my life. So again, speaking to moms who haven't been active for months to years, or moms that were active just 4 or 5 weeks ago, all it takes is 7 to 12 days to see significant change in your muscle mass when we change our activity level. Now that you're all bummed out that you tried to work out so hard in your pregnancy and you might have lost a lot of muscle mass just in the few weeks of your postpartum transition, let me help you figure out what to do about it. I don't want to leave you hanging. Side note, why I wanted to tie into this research is because so many of us moms just minimize what we feel intuitively in our bodies. We feel all of these changes, but we also can look around us and see that it's just common. Common does not mean normal, but when we look around us and we see everyone else is kind of going through it too, then it just can sometimes change our ability to trust our intuition and give ourselves the recognition we deserve around what our body just went through, how significant that is, and how, as much as we love our partners, as they don't have to endure anything remotely close to this to be completely broken down and ripped apart and then have to mother in that space. So I want this research, I want this information to help highlight to you just how crazy these body changes are, even in just this one muscle mass content. There's 100 other ways I could talk about how beautiful and amazing and crazy this transition is for your body. But we're going to use this to springboard into what a recovery timeline looks like. I have this postpartum exercise timeline graphic, and I'll try to link that in the show notes below as well. It is a pyramid. In this pyramid, the bottom is the widest, the top is the point, and I have 5 layers of this pyramid from bottom to top. With this pyramid, I have time frames that walk from early recovery to the top of the pyramid with your whatever that is for you, high impact training or whatever activities you like to do with your body. Where do we start after birth? Also, side note, if you're listening to this and you are months to years postpartum and you're like, Dr. Natalie, I didn't know any of this. What do I do? Does it still apply to me? Yes, it still applies to you. It applies to everyone, no matter how far postpartum you are. If you haven't really recovered in this postpartum framework that I've highly researched, you can start at the bottom of the pyramid at any time, if it's 0 weeks to 4 weeks postpartum or if it's months to years postpartum. But this bottom foundational layer, here's where every mom should start. In this bottom of the pyramid, I have the time frame between 0 to 4 weeks, and that could be, again, 0 to 4 weeks postpartum, or just 0 to 4 weeks from when you start taking care of your body in general. This I call the breathwork and tissue mobility phase. In this foundational phase, why do so many people talk about breathwork, Dr. Natalie? Because breathing is the foundation of healing your core. When baby grows inside your belly and all of your organs get smushed up into your rib cage and pushed down into your pelvis to make space for the baby, our rib cage can expand up to 4 inches in diameter. So if you feel like your bra size changed and your rib cage got wider, it probably did. Your bones and that ligament laxity make space for baby as everything gets shoved upward. What also happens when our rib cage expands is our diaphragm gets stretched out. Our diaphragm is a muscle that looks like an umbrella, and it sits between your chest and your abdomen. It is crucial to help you breathe. If our ribs expand, our diaphragm gets stretched out, and our core gets really weak, then we lose this really important pressure system inside of our core that helps keep your pelvic floor healthy, keep your breathing mechanics strong, and help keeps your core engaged. So everything essentially just gets stretched out and loose. Working on breath work can really help to retrain the really fundamental mechanics of breathing that get all kinds of screwy when we're pregnant. Just remembering how short of breath you could feel, and maybe you still feel short of breath even though you are months postpartum. Getting your diaphragm to work, getting your rib cage mobility to re-engage, all helps your core fire correctly and re-knit together. In these early phases, when I think tissue mobility for this phase of the postpartum body, I'm again just thinking of things being able to move and groove together. Sometimes through a birth, there is so much tightening and cramping our muscles do because all of our ligaments are still loose. And so being able to balance out the system, release what's tight and engage what's weak so that we can get everything just to essentially fire the right way again. This is really simple stuff. It's not very complicated, but it is also something that almost every mom skips. If we skip this layer of the pyramid and you start to move up to higher level activities, but you never worked on this breath work and this coordination and tissue mobility, it will be really hard for your core to engage the right way with higher level exercise. And I think of so many clients I've had in the past who come to me 10 months to 2 years postpartum. They're like, Dr. Natalie, I've been doing CrossFit and I cannot get rid of this mom pooch. I still have a big ab separation. I do all of these core workouts. Why is it not changing? And every time it has to do with this part. we haven't started with the bottom of the pyramid. They've never learned to knit their core back together and re-engage it properly. So no matter how many core workouts they do, they feel like they don't have control and they're just not, their core isn't working the right way. After this layer, let's bump up to the next one. You've worked on your breath work, you've worked on the base of the pyramid. Now we get into a little bit of strength. This is strength on the floor with no weight. So body weight activation. The time frame for this phase is between 4 to 8 weeks. So it's about 1 to 2 months of intention. This type of workout is not the kind that'll make you sweat and get your heart rate up, but it teaches your muscles how to engage properly. We're going to start to really get into some deep core activation to re-solidify that foundation and that bedrock of your whole pelvic system. You're also going to activate your glutes and your postural muscles in this phase. Our posture can get so crazy through pregnancy. We can round our shoulders forward as our breast gets heavier. We can arch our low back a lot or maybe tuck our hips under to accommodate for the weight change of our growing belly. There are so many things that happen in our body throughout our pregnancy journey that really disrupt and change our healthy postural habits. This phase is all about body weight. It's all low impact on the floor. You still have a lot of hormones running through your body. Just because baby came out doesn't mean that you don't have other things happening like relaxin that are working against you. You start to incorporate low load with high repetition to activate muscles and start to build some proper activation. The next layer, number 3 of this pyramid, moving up, is strength with standing and lightweight movements. This is between 6 to 12 weeks. This is about 2 to 3 months into my 4-phase recovery system or your healing journey, wherever you're at. This is something that moms also skip right to. They might get that 6-week clearance and go straight to this 3rd layer of the pyramid and pick up some weights and try to do some squats or some lunges to quickly find out that it feels really hard. And this is ironically exactly what I did after my first baby. I am even a pelvic floor PT, have been before I had babies, but I remember going through my own pregnancy and birth with my first daughter. I was, again, super active. So I thought what I felt like were the lowest level exercises that I could start with at 6 weeks. I remember doing a lunge with my feet apart and trying to go down into a lunge at 6 or 7 weeks postpartum, no weight or anything, and feeling like my pelvis feels so wobbly. I feel like I'm going to break apart like an eggshell. I felt so out of control and so weak. Immediately, it hurt my pubic bone. I quickly found out that even what I thought was low level for me was just still too intense to start with. That being said, if you follow this postpartum exercise timeline and you've done the other 2 layers first, your body will easily be able to adapt to this newer load because you've set the foundation, you've learned how to activate your core properly, you've gotten your glutes to turn back on, your posture is looking a little better. So now you can tolerate a little bit of a higher load with some standing style work and some super light weights. Moms who skip the layers and go straight into this step are the ones that can easily feel discouraged, frustrated, can be prone to getting injured from trying new activities. And when that happens, when we feel discouraged and then, or we get injured, we kind of sign off, this is just not time yet. I'm not going to do anything. So they wait longer instead of starting at the bottom of the period. They just say, no, thanks, not for me. I won't do anything for another few months and I'll try again later when I feel stronger. But most of the time that means we don't circle back to the bottom of the pyramid and start there. We just continue to have disuse, which means back to those research articles, you're not building muscle mass. Maybe you continue to lose muscle mass in your postpartum journey because you haven't started at that foundation and rebuilt it from the ground up. You're following this exercise timeline. You're learning so much. So we went through the first 3 layers. We're in the 4th layer of the pyramid out of 5. And this is the fun part that I love getting to with my clients. They've spent intention in each of these layers. So then when they get to this strength with moderate load at the 4th layer of the pyramid, they're between 12 to 16 weeks. Their workouts are getting more creative. We are starting to challenge them in dynamic planes, right? We don't just, especially as moms, we do all kinds of weird things to take care of our kids. The way that we bend over to reach into a crib, the way that we have to get up and down off the ground while we're holding one child like a football, or trying to balance one kid on our hip while we're trying to do a chore, fold some laundry, do some dishes, whatever it is. We don't live in these boxes where we just do squats a certain way, or we just, I don't know, do some bicep curls, right? We have to have strength in really functional and dynamic ways. This layer of the pyramid is also something that I see skipped or just completely not addressed in clinic settings. I've worked in insurance clinics, I've worked in cash clinics, and oftentimes moms get to like that third layer where they're doing some strength with standing, lightweight type stuff, and their symptoms start to go away. Maybe their back isn't hurting very much anymore and their leaking is totally gone. And so they decide that they're done with PT, or maybe an insurance-based clinic, that's when you discharge somebody because they're now, air quotes, asymptomatic. They don't have any symptoms, but we haven't given the mom the chance to progress to this next layer of the pyramid to start to create some true lasting muscle tone to prevent recurrence of issues, to prevent the leaking from coming back, to prevent the back pain from coming back. And we definitely haven't given them some solid strength that they can use throughout their daily life to avoid getting hurt, doing all the things you have to do as a mom. I have one client I love so much. She came to me after her third baby was born, and we started around 3 months postpartum. She had had chronic back pain since college over 15 years ago. And when I was asking her about different goals she wants to set, she was like, I would like my back not to hurt every single day. And that was her goal. And I'm like, okay. In my mind, I'm thinking, that's a pretty low bar. I know we can pass that, but I'm just gonna, you don't know a life without back pain, especially since having kids. So I'm just going to let you rate that goal for yourself. And she had leaking, where she had some episodes of losing control in public and feeling super embarrassed about it at her girls' gymnastics meet. Her top goal was, I don't want to leak at all, and I want less back pain. When we got to this fourth layer of the pyramid, because my 4-phase recovery system is a complete solution to get moms to feeling amazing in their bodies, we got to this fourth layer of the pyramid, and she was loving working out again. She hadn't done strength training in a really long time and not with any consistency. She was a college athlete, and so it felt really fun for her to be able to train again and do some more dynamic movement that she hadn't done in a while. And she kind of signed off because she had this chronic back pain and she just always had felt so weak since having kids. And by the time we got to this layer, 12 to 16 weeks is this phase of the timeline I took her through. She had no back pain literally at all. After 15 years, she was completely pain-free in her back, and she literally could not believe it. And the confidence that came out of her and the freedom that came out of her from being able to do things that she hadn't done in years and to be pain-free was mind-blowing. And it gets me so jazzed because that is the hope, right? Is to be able to get moms back to a place where they feel like them and they feel excited to engage with their kids and they feel capable to handle their day without hurting. And that really came in that fourth phase of the pyramid. The tippy top of the pyramid is really fun. I call this impact training, and the time frame is between 3 to 6 months postpartum. And this time frame is 3 to 6 months from the beginning of your recovery work. This phase can take longer than that for a lot of moms, and that is totally normal. When it comes to impact training, I'm thinking of the higher level movements that my moms want to be able to do with complete freedom, whether that's training for a triathlon or a half marathon, to be able to run or do some heavy lifting. This is something that is very specific to my client's interests and also can be the most variable out of everything. In order to do these things that my moms love to do, they spent time in each of these layers. So by the time they approached their favorite activity again, they felt completely capable. They trusted their bodies. They were not scared to get hurt. Their strength and endurance was there to support them in the activity so they could start to train gradually. No mom can get to this phase of activity without having built the pyramid from the ground up, from the early days of breath work. In my work with my clients, this is when they've graduated beyond the 4-phase recovery system and they want to have some one-on-one support to train for different goals that they have, bigger goals. These are some clients that I work with long term, and we continue having a relationship after my postpartum recovery program. We just get to dream big and help moms feel ready to take on the world. Now, for some of us moms, being able to do those big, crazy things is not very important to us. We just don't want to hurt. We don't want to have back pain. We don't want to leak. We want to be able to just live our lives and feel like how we used to in our bodies with some sense of control and confidence. And that is great too. Every mom deserves that. Now, this is just from the bird's eye view of the postpartum journey. One of my favorite midwives, she would tell her clients all the time, it takes 6 weeks to heal from the birth and over a year to heal from the pregnancy. What I love about that mentality is when it comes to healing from any surgery or any type of medical procedure, if you broke your arm and were in a cast, about 6 weeks is the healing timeline for wounds to close and for bones to reset. Great, love that. But that is the very beginning of the postpartum recovery timeline, and I hope this gave you a better idea of what to expect and how to get there. What I love about my virtual program is I've taken everything I've learned from every setting, from being an orthopedic PT in a high-intensity athletic sports clinic to my pelvic floor journey with insurance settings, with cash-based settings, and my own personal experience of my journey into motherhood and postpartum healing. I've essentially taken everything that I've learned and I've created the perfect program that I wish I had early postpartum. There are so many barriers for moms to taking care of ourselves, whether that is time, it's just really challenging to get out the door to make appointments in general. Maybe you have multiple kids, or maybe you have no childcare support, and to go to pelvic floor PT once a week, every week over the course of a few months feels impossible. It's because it is. It's really hard to manage that as a mom. That's what happened to me. Or maybe we just have little to no support from medical providers to tell us the information we so deeply deserve about our healing bodies, so you have no clue what to expect. Or maybe you feel like there's something inside of you that knows that this isn't how it should be and you want it to get better, but the only resource you have is Instagram and you save core workouts, but you have no clue how to put them together, in what order they should go, or if you're even doing them right. Or maybe you are fortunate to have a pelvic floor PT local that is cash-based and they are a really excellent provider that people recommend, but it costs an arm and a leg to go, and so you can only afford to go to 4 or 5 visits anyways. I know that that's just not going to get moms better, and I've been in those situations as a mom and as the medical provider, and I've seen it firsthand how many moms only show up for a few visits because that's what they can handle, and then months later they end up back because everything got worse. I want moms to have as many barriers removed to quality care so that they can go through this whole recovery timeline. They can regain their strength so that they can keep up with their babies, their growing families, that they can feel grounded and confident in their bodies again. And this is a complete system that is made for the busy mom who doesn't have a lot of time. So none of my programs should take you 45 minutes to an hour a day. I made all of these tools to fit into bite-sized chunks of your day so that you can do them consistently, you can have the support that you need, and be able to see the true transformation from beginning to end and feel like yourself again. So who wouldn't want that? That sounds marvelous. This is the foundation of my 4-phase recovery system that I have researched and developed and implement into my program. If you would like to learn more about this postpartum recovery program, I have my website below. It has all the details, everything you need to know about what's included, what the value is, what the cost is, what type of support you get from me. If that sounds like it would be amazing and you would love it so much, you can apply to the program directly from their website, and then we will be in touch about next steps. Please share this episode with a mama friend who needs to hear it. And thank you so much for joining Coach the Mother. I can't wait to chat next week, Mom.